Understanding the crimes of Rurik Jutting isn't simple. This wasn't just another murder case. It wasn't just another wealthy banker hiding secrets. His conviction stood out as one of the most unusual and disturbing in modern history. A British man, thriving in Hong Kong's glittering financial district, living in luxury. But behind the walls of his high-rise apartment, a nightmare was unfolding that nobody could have imagined. On paper, Rurik Jutting looked like success personified. He was educated at Cambridge. He had landed a high-paying job at Bank of America. He worked in finance, surrounded by privilege and status. In the neon-lit Har Wan Chai, he lived a lifestyle that seemed enviable. But the truth was darker. Behind closed doors, Jutting's life was spiraling out of control. Friends and colleagues started to notice subtle cracks. He withdrew from conversations. He drank heavily night after night. He lost interest in the sharp, polished image he once carried. On his phone and computer, he stored something that would later shock investigators to their core. Hours of self-recorded videos where he described, in chilling detail, his fantasies of cruelty. The mask of a successful banker was slipping, and beneath it was something terrifying. In October 2014, the spiral reached its peak. That was when he invited a young woman, Sumarti Ningsih, to his apartment. She was just 23 years old, far from home, trying to earn a living in Hong Kong. She thought it was another routine client, another night of work. She didn't know she had just stepped into a trap. Inside the apartment, Jutting filmed everything. What followed were hours of torture. He taunted her, humiliated her, and inflicted suffering that even hardened police officers later struggled to watch. For Sumarti, it was hours of terror. By morning, she was dead, her body hidden away in the bathroom. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the horror inside the luxury high-rise. But the nightmare didn't end there. Just 2 days later, Jutting struck again. This time, his victim was Seneng Mujiasih. She, too, was lured into his apartment. But this crime was different, sloppier, louder. Neighbors later admitted they heard screams at night. They heard the sounds of chaos. But no one called the police. They assumed it was just another fight in a city where noise often comes and goes. By the time authorities finally entered the apartment, they uncovered a scene beyond imagination. 2 women, 2 lives stolen. The air was thick with the smell of decay. On the walls, evidence of violence. And on his phone and laptop, hours of self-recorded confession tapes. He described his actions with chilling calm, sometimes even with pride. These tapes became the centerpiece of the case against him. At trial, everyone expected one outcome: insanity. After all, how could a man do this and still be considered sane? His defense argued he was broken by drug abuse, alcohol, and mental illness. They pointed to his addictions, to his erratic behavior, to the way he spiraled after leaving London. Psychiatrists were brought in. Some suggested he was delusional, unable to control himself. But then came the twist. The jury saw the videos. They saw how he spoke. They saw how carefully he calculated his actions. He wasn't out of control. He wasn't detached from reality. He knew exactly what he was doing. He filmed it because he wanted to remember it. He wanted to relive it. That wasn't insanity. That was choice. The verdict shocked some observers. Guilty of murder, life in prison, no chance of release. The court had rejected the insanity plea. The videos showed not madness, but awareness. Not confusion, but precision. But the conviction raised even more chilling questions. Why did he record everything? Why document his crimes in such detail? Was it just for himself, or was there something else behind it? When investigators dug deeper into his devices, they found outlines, notes, fantasies he had typed out. He had written about killing before he ever acted. He had created step-by-step methods, like he was preparing for an exam. These weren't random acts. This was an explosion of madness. This was a blueprint for violence. And police began to wonder, was Jutting just beginning when he was caught? Or had he planned something far larger? What unsettled people most were the inconsistencies. Friends and former girlfriends said they never saw signs of violence. He was intense, yes. Arrogant, yes, but not violent. Colleagues said he was the smartest man in the room, ambitious, driven. How does someone like that transform into a cold-blooded killer? The timeline didn't make sense. The cracks in his life didn't explain the level of brutality. It was as if another person had been living inside him all along, waiting for the chance to emerge. During his own recordings, Jutting admitted he couldn't stop. He said that if the police hadn't caught him, he would have continued. He would have killed again and again. He described it almost casually, as though it was inevitable. So the question became chillingly clear. How many more lives were at risk? If he hadn't been caught when he was, how far would he have gone? Here is where the story takes an even darker turn. Because during the investigation, police uncovered clues that suggested Jutting might not have been entirely alone. In his files, there were references to conversations, to others who shared his fantasies. There were whispers of darker online communities, whispers of networks where people encouraged one another's violent thoughts. But much of the data had been wiped. Some of the files were encrypted and locked. To this day, parts of his digital trail remain a mystery. So the haunting question remains unanswered. Was Jutting truly a lone monster, acting only on his own twisted desires? Or was he part of something bigger, something that stretched beyond one man in one apartment? The uncertainty keeps investigators uneasy even now. The crimes of Rurik Jutting shook Hong Kong to its core. They expose the terrifying reality that evil can hide behind wealth, education, and privilege. That monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like the man in a suit, sipping a drink at the bar, smiling politely at his neighbors. And sometimes, by the time the mask slips, it's already too late. But here is where the story doesn't end. Because the files on his devices, the fragments of conversations, the encrypted notes, they hint at something larger, something that was never fully uncovered. And some investigators believe the darkest part of the story has yet to be told. Part 2 coming soon.